Hi. Hi. This is going to be the first of some uh, murder, no, true crime stories. I don't really know where to find true crime stories, that aren't already in like podcast form. But I'm doing my best. This one's from a news article, um, but it seems to be interesting enough. Anyway, enjoy. The Graeme Thorne tragedy. The crime that haunts Sydney still. Okay. Former New South Wales senior Crown prosecutor Mark Tsetetsky was the same age as Graeme Thorne when the young boy disappeared from outside his Bondi home in Australia's first kidnap for ransom case 59 years ago. Well, this was written in 2019, so 63 years ago, 62 years ago. Kidnapping of an 8-year-old Scots college boy on his way to school on the 7th of July 1960 shocked the nation. Like many Sydney children, I was very moved at the time when he went missing. I was 8 and had photos of Graeme pasted on the wall of my bedroom. Pasted on the wall of my bedroom. To know what he looked like, so that if I saw him in the streets, I could tell my parents, Tsedetsky told the Sun Herald. Tsedetsky, who wrote the 2014 book Kidnapped about the case, says in many ways the search for the boy influenced him to become a barrister. He is now best known for the prosecution of backpack murderer Ivan Milat. The 1960 Thorne case, which haunts Sydney-siders still, introduced the concept of stranger danger to Australian children. It was also the first time forensic science was used in a criminal investigation. It was the end of innocence in Australia. Childhoods changed for many in Sydney. We are no longer given the same freedom to play in the streets or roam the bush. Dozens of people have told me how they were confined to playing in the backyard after this, as so many parents were fearful, Zidensky said. The Thorne tragedy began on June 1st, 1960, when Graeme's father, Basil, won the 10th draw of the Sydney Opera House lottery, and the £100,000, equivalent to $3 million today, windfall. For the travelling salesman and his family, this hit the headlines. Over at Clontarf, a Hungarian immigrant called Stefan, born Istvan Bradley, stared with disdain at the photo on the front page of the newspaper when he hatched a ransom plan and headed to 79 Edward Street, Bondi, to observe the family's daily routine. Bradley needed to confirm the telephone number of the Thornes' flat if he was to make the call to demand the ransom. Posing as a private investigator, he knocked on their door, asking to check the telephone number. Frederick Thorne confirmed the number to the flat, thinking it strange as their phone number had not yet been installed. Bradley had all he needed. On an ordinary Thursday morning, Bradley, a father of 3 himself, drove to Bondi. He saw young Graeme, dressed in his grey school uniform and cap, walk down Wellington Street towards the corner store, where, as usual, he would buy a packet of chips before being picked up by his mother's friend, Phyllis Smith, to take him to school. Bradley waited in his car in the spot. Mrs. Smith usually parked her vehicle and convinced the young Bondi boy to get in and he would take him to school. Graeme willingly hopped in the car. Bradley drove him to Centennial Park, where he overpowered the 8-year-old boy with force, wrapped his hands and legs together with twine and gagged his mouth, then wrapped him in a picnic blanket and put him in the boot. The blue tartan blanket would prove crucial to the investigation. Bradley headed home across Middle Harbour and parked his car near a public phone box on the north side of Smith Bridge. At 9:40 a.m., he made the first call to the Thorne household, demanding £25,000. By 5 p.m. that afternoon, "If I don't get the money, I'll feed him to the sharks," he said, a threat that has lodged in the collective memory of Sydney-siders of the era ever since. When he got home, Bradley checked the boot. Thorne's body was stiff. Suddenly, he had a corpse, not a kidnapping, on his hands. But this still didn't stop him from trying to extract the ransom from the Thornes. At 9:47 p.m., he called again, and the phone was answered by a police officer, so they could later trace the call. All the police leave across the state was cancelled in the days after Graeme's disappearance, in what became the biggest manhunt in Australia's history. A reward of £5,000 was declared, and another £15,000 was offered by 2 newspapers. The agonizing wait for the parents in the search of their son played out dramatically across newspapers, television, and radio. The Thornes were gripped by fear, and every twist and turn of the tale, and most parents across the nation followed the ordeal. Every sort of crank call tormented the family in the quest to find the child. Fake callers masquerading as both son and kidnapper. Then Graeme's school case, embossed with his name, was found on the road just off Wakehurst Parkway. On Tuesday, August 16th, nearly 6 weeks after the kidnapping, and 1.5 k's from where the case was found, 3 schoolboys discovered Thorne's body, still in his school uniform, hidden on a vacant lot in Grandview Grove, Seaford. Soil scrapings from the boy's body and the blanket he was wrapped in showed tiny fragments of pink limestone mortar, which indicated that his body had been stored under a house. Forensic scientists helped police narrow the search for the house with a blue car, pink mortar, and with 2 cypress trees growing in the yard. Holy shit, how the fuck do you get forensic in the 60s? Jesus. DNA wasn't even that reliable in the 60s. Oh, I suppose they're not doing DNA, they're doing plants, and we've had plants longer than we've had DNA, so in the science sense, anyway. Pardon? Thanks to a tipple from the postman who identified such a home in Clontarf, the killer's house was found, but Bradley had already fled the country with his family. The perpetrator was eventually identified from the hair of his Pekingese dog on the Okparinga picnic blanket he had wrapped Graeme in before putting him in the boot of the car. When Frederick Thorne saw Bradley's picture, she recognized him as the man who had been at their house posing as a private detective. Although Bradley had escaped Sydney on the P&O liner Himalaya with his wife and children, he was arrested when he went ashore in Colombo in October 1960. He was flown back to Sydney and charged with the murder of Graeme Thorne and sentenced to life in Goulburn prison. He died of a heart attack while playing tennis there at the age of 42. Graeme Thorne was buried in Macquarie Park, and his family moved to Rose Bay. But according to the reports, they never recovered from the tragedy. After studying the evidence of the 9-day trial that convicted Bradley, Former Crown Prosecutor Tatinsky believed the kidnapper did not mean to kill the young boy. At the time, it was arguably Australia's best-known crime, and solving it showed the world that what forensic science was capable of, Tatinsky said. There was more cutting-edge scientific evidence used in the trial than any in New South Wales at that point. Prior to it, kidnappings was not listed as a crime, but a Labour Premier Jack Heroff changed that. Jesus. So before this, kidnapping was not considered a crime? Fuck, alright. Many other things changed after the ransom/murder. Not just the sense of safety many Sydney-siders felt. Really, Sydney-siders? Thereafter, not for publication was an option to tick on every. Oh, okay. After this event, not for publication was an option that could be ticked on a lottery ticket from Sydney Opera House. Okay, cool. That was the thrilling highlights of the Graeme Thorne tragedy, the crime that haunts Sydney still.